Hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. How's everybody doing today? Hey, it's Saturday, July 22nd, 2017, and we are live today. There's a lot going on, and I just got back in town. I just got back in town this past Tuesday. I was in Atlanta filming my portion of, I was at the Liberated Minds Black Homeschool and Education Expo. And then also I was filming my portion of the documentary, Black Friday, What Legacy Will You Leave? Black Friday, What Legacy Will You Leave? Part 2 from director Rick Mathis. So you see me wearing my Black Friday shirt. This is the first Black Friday documentary. And we have the documentaries at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com if you want to order those also. Okay. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right. So very, very busy week trying to get caught up on some things. But I wanted to talk about this. I did this broadcast. I did the broadcast back on July 14th, dealing with the 3/5 Compromise of 1787. Okay. And I'm going to share that with you today. So, oftentimes, I do radio here in Detroit on 9:10 a.m. The Superstation, the Voice of Detroit. I also do the African History Network show on Blog Talk Radio as well. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer, founder of the African History Network and the African History Network fan page that we're broadcasting on right now. So oftentimes I hear people talk about the 3/5 Compromise of 1787 in the U.S. Constitution, or what they think that the 3/5 Compromise says. Okay. And, what a lot of people think the 3/5 Compromise says is not actually what it says. Okay. So we're going to break that down. And, just recently, it was like last week, I saw, I'm sorry, last week, I heard on the radio, it was a national radio show, National African American Talk Radio show. And somebody called in and said, the 3/5 Compromise said we were 3/5 of a human being, things like this. Right. And that's just not true. Okay. So I'm going to share this with you all. And then also we'll talk some about the online course that I teach, called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, that's a 12-hour, 6-week online course that I teach. And we deal with thousands of years of history in there. We deal with the African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years. So we just posted the link for the online course. You can register for that. As soon as you sign up, as soon as you register for it, you can watch the session we did last night and the previous 4 or 5 sessions. And you'll be caught up for this coming Friday also. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and get things started. How's everybody doing? People posting on Facebook. Hey, share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. Shout out to everybody watching us because they're going to get a real history lesson here. Okay, so let's bring this up and we'll go ahead and get this started here. All right. And I wanted to do this broadcast past couple of days, but it's been so hectic. I haven't been able to do it. I had to do my segment on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation on the morning show. Wake Up with Steve Hood. Had to do that Thursday morning. And I'm getting ready to head to Atlanta for the Liberated Minds Black Homeschool and Education Expo, which is Saturday, July 15th through Sunday, July 16th in Atlanta, Georgia Piedmont Technical Center. So I'll be there doing a presentation. But I want to do this wanted to do 2 things. So today we're going to talk about the 3/5 Compromise, the 3/5 Compromise of 1787, the 3/5 Compromise of 1787. Okay. And this is in the U.S. Constitution. All right. We're going to talk about that and dispel some myths about that. And I've talked about this before in some of my shows, but I haven't really done a real, presentation video about this. Okay. And also, we're going to do a brief overview, a brief preview of an online course that I teach called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So we'll be teaching, I'll be teaching another session of that online course this evening about 7:30 p.m. or so, okay, online. And you can register for it. We'll post a link to register. It's a 12-hour, 6-week online course that I teach. Normally on Fridays, about 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch it over and over again, okay? So as soon as you register, you can watch the first 3 or 4 sessions, and we have about 12 hours of bonus footage or bonus content. So we just posted the link there. It says register here. You can register for that online course if you like also. And the full course is only $40, all right? Okay, so in some of my presentations and also radio shows that I do, I've done national radio, did national radio for a few years. I do radio here in Detroit. Oftentimes I hear people talk about the Constitution says we were 3/5 of a human being. The Constitution says we were 3/5 of a human being. I was just listening to a national radio show today, and it said the same thing. Somebody called in and said the same thing as well. All right. That is not true. That is not historically accurate. That is not what the Constitution says. So we're going to break this down based upon facts and evidence. Okay. Shout out to everybody watching us on Facebook. Hey, share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. Share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. Okay. And we'll put this on our YouTube channel also as well. Okay. So, what people are referring to is Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, or Paragraph 3 of the U.S. Constitution, and it's known as the 3/5 Compromise, okay? It's known as the 3/5 Compromise of 1787, all right? And I remember back in 1963, I think it was 63, University of California in Berkeley, there's a famous interview that Malcolm X did. And Malcolm X talked about, he said the Constitution said we were 3/5 of a human being. And he said that the slave master got a 3/5 weighted vote. Okay. I love Malcolm to death. Malcolm's one of my heroes. All right. And I just did a presentation, I think it was 2 Saturdays ago, in Malcolm's hometown of Lansing, Michigan. Okay. I live in Detroit. Lansing's the capital. He lived in Lansing, Michigan for a while when he was a child, till his family's house was burned down. They were ran out of Lansing. They went to East Lansing. But that's not true. And you see the picture of Malcolm behind me, right? You see the picture of Malcolm behind me. Malcolm's one of my heroes. Okay. But that's just not true. All right. So let's deal with this historically. Okay. So if we look at the U.S. Constitution, all right, and you can go to loc.gov, which is the Library of Congress's website, loc.gov. That's the Library of Congress's website. Can everybody hear me okay? Just want to make sure. Looks like the video may be breaking up a little bit here on Facebook. Okay. But when we look at the, just want to make sure everybody can hear me all right. Okay. When we look at the U.S. Constitution, now you can go to loc.gov. That's the Library of Congress's website. You can also go to archives.gov. Okay, that's the National Archives. You can read the U.S. Constitution there. You may want to get yourself a book like this. Okay, so when I bought this book, I don't remember exactly what year. This is about 8 years ago. This was $2. This is called The Declaration of Independence and Other Great Documents of American History. The Declaration of Independence and Other Great Documents of American History. Okay. And this has the Emancipation Proclamation. This has the U.S. Constitution, Declaration of Independence, all those documents in this one book. Okay. You may want to get something like this. So if we look at this and what it actually says, okay, I'm gonna go over what it actually says in the Constitution. Then we'll deal with the history behind it, because most people don't understand the history behind it. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 says, representatives and direct taxes, okay, shall be apportioned, keyword, shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole numbers of free persons including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons, persons with a capital P, 3/5 of all other persons. The actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of the Congress of the United States, and within every subsequent term of 10 years, in such manner as they shall by law direct. Okay, so the first now this is 1787. All right, this is in the U.S. Constitution. U.S. Constitution is largely written by Thomas Jefferson, a slave owner. Okay, who's going to become president in 1800. Right, and this is during the Philadelphia Convention that the Constitution is debated on and hashed out and revised, etc. Okay, so this is during 1787. This is during the American Revolutionary War, which is from this is after American Revolutionary. This is American Revolutionary War is 1775 to 1783. Okay, so this is after American Revolutionary War. This is 1787. Okay, this is after the Declaration of Independence of 1776, signed July 4th, 1776, by a few people. The majority of the signers don't sign until August 2nd, 1776. Okay, all right. So, what they're talking about here, keyword, apportioned. All right. And when you look at the first line, it said representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among several states, which may be included within the union. Okay, according to their respective numbers. All right. So there's a very good article that you can reference for information about this and good historical information. And there's an article from theroot.com. Theroot.com is called 3/5 Clause, Why Its Taint Persists. 3/5 Clause, Why Its Taint Persists. Okay. And we'll post a link here on the thread so you can read this article. All right. It's written by Dr. Paul Finkelman. Okay. PhD, Dr. Paul Finkelman. He does a good job of really breaking this down and dealing with the history behind it. Okay. So when they talk about representatives, they're talking about the U.S. House of Representatives, okay, because they're forming the U.S. House of Representatives. The previous form of government, you're dealing with the Continental Congress and the Articles of Confederation. And under the Articles of Confederation, each state had only one vote, okay? Each state had only one vote. So a state like Virginia, which had a large population of about 690,000 people, had the same amount of votes as a small state. Okay, a smaller state like Delaware or whatever the smaller state was at the time. Okay, Pennsylvania, a smaller state like Pennsylvania, or a smaller state like Rhode Island, which only had about 65,000 in population at that time. Okay, so what they're doing is they're changing the way this is done. So they're going to have the U.S. Senate, where each state gets 2 seats in the U.S. Senate. So this is why today you have 50 states in the union and you have 100 U.S. senators. Each state gets 2 U.S. senators, right? But then you have a U.S. House of Representatives, and that U.S. House of Representatives is based upon population. Okay, that U.S. House of Representatives is based upon population. So a state like California, which is the largest state in the union, okay, has more seats in the U.S. House of Representatives than a state like Maine or Vermont, which are 2 of the smallest states in the union. Okay, so the question becomes, and this is what they were debating during the Philadelphia Convention, is how do you count the enslaved population? How do you count the enslaved population? It says representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union, etc. All right. So you have southern states who want to count the full population of those enslaved, And you have northern states who say, well, wait a second, if you count the full population of those enslaved, this is going to give the South total dominance in the U.S. House of Representatives, and you'll be able to just push through whatever legislation you want through the U.S. House of Representatives. So they're going back and forth. Back and forth debating this on how to count the population of enslaved Africans. Okay. And also they're trying to figure out, how do you count them, because they're considered property? How do you count them? How do you tax them as well? All right. So you're going to have a lot of northern states that have a larger overall population. Okay. Like, you're going to have some northern states that have a larger overall population and of free people, I should say, a larger population of free people. You're going to have some southern states that have a smaller population of free people, but when you add in the enslaved Africans, they're going to have a larger total population. So, for instance, in 1787, if you look at the state of Virginia, Virginia has a total population of 690,000. Okay, 690,000. 288,000 of the 690,000 are enslaved African people. Okay. Whereas if you look at the state of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania at that time had 430,000 people. Okay. About 430,000 people. And but they only had about 4,000 who were enslaved. So they're going back and forth trying to debate this and figure this out. How do you count the population of enslaved African people? Okay. And the North is trying to prevent the South from having total dominance in the House of Representatives. So they're going back and forth. Some people say count half of the population. Some say count 3/4 of the population. They finally decide to count 3/5 of the population in bondage, 3/5 of the population enslaved. Nowhere in the Constitution and nowhere in the 3/5 Compromise, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, does it say that the enslaved population was 3/5 of a human being. That's a total misunderstanding and misinterpretation of the U.S. Constitution. Okay. Now, in this article, it says, despite popular understandings, this provision did not declare that African Americans were 3/5 of a person. Rather, the provision declared that the slave states would get extra representation in Congress for their slaves, even though those states treated slaves purely as property. Okay, this was a provision that was not directly about race, but about status and the allocation of political power. The other thing that most people don't know is that African Americans who were free, because there's a small free population, okay, at this time. Now, not counting those indigenous Africans, because of course we know that African people have been in this land we call the United States of America going back at least 51,700 years. And when you look at the work from Dr. David Imhotep, who I talk about a lot in his book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, he deals with this evidence there. Okay. And there were more African people who were already here than were brought here during the transatlantic slave trade. Okay. So, but you're going to have a small population of free African Americans at this time. The full population of free African Americans was counted. Okay. The full population of free African Americans was counted. That's something that's not talked about. All right. So free blacks were counted in exactly the same way as whites. The clause did not say that a slave was 3/5 of a person. Once again, it's saying that you count 3/5 of that population, meaning that if, say, for instance, hypothetically, say, for instance, Virginia had 100,000 enslaved African people. Okay, you're going to count 3/5 of that 100,000, which is 60,000. And this determines, and you add that number to the number of free persons in the state of Virginia, and this determines how many seats in the U.S. House of Representatives the state of Virginia will get. Okay, which is huge, because usually legislation will start in the House of Representatives, and once it passes the House, it will go to the U.S. Senate. Okay, so this is huge. So this is what this was all about. It does not say we were 3/5 of a human being. The other thing is that if you get a book like this from Dover, this one here, Declaration of Independence and other great documents of American history, and you study the Three-Fifths Compromise, it'll tell you that the 14th Amendment corrects this. The 14th Amendment corrects the counting of it. Okay, so there's a whole lot of just total misunderstanding about the Three-Fifths Compromise. And I've heard PhDs just totally say, you know, the Constitution says we're 3/5 of a human being, things like that. No, it doesn't. And then they don't talk about how that was corrected with the 14th Amendment of 1868. But the other thing is, they don't say, well, wait a second, when the first census was taken in 1790, because the first census is taken in 1790 when the first Congress meets, the full population of African people was counted. Because the reason why the census was created was the national census was to keep track of the population, especially of enslaved African people in ratio to free whites. Because in some states, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, things like this, you had more slaves than you did free people. So, and they could easily be overran. So this is the real reason why the U.S. Census was created. Dr. Claude Anderson talks about this in Black Labor, White Wealth. Black Labor, White Wealth. Dr. Claude Anderson talks about this, okay? All right, so if we continue here, and I'll show you some information from Dr. David Imhotep, because we deal with him in the class also, okay, in our online class. And I'll be teaching a session of that today around 7:30 p.m. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave teacher in school. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, if you need me to post the link again so you can register for an online course, it's a 12-hour, 6-week online course that I teach. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch it over and over again. And we deal with thousands of years of history in the online course also. Okay, so I want to delve into this a little deeper here. All right. So the origin of the clause illustrates the Three-Fifths Compromise, illustrates the complete confederation. Each state had a single vote in the National Congress. So in 1787, on the eve of the Constitutional Convention, this meant that Virginia had, which had about 690,000 people, and Pennsylvania, which had about 430,000 people, overall populations, had the same number of votes in Congress as Delaware, with a population under 60,000, and Rhode Island with a population under 65,000. One of the goals of James Madison and the other framers of the Constitution was to replace this undemocratic system of representation with representation in a new Congress based on population. Okay, so what this is going to do is give a lot of power to the South. However, this gives a imbalance in power to the South, and is going to give the South an incentive to keep slavery intact. Also, this is the other thing. It's going to incentive to keep slavery intact. Now, this is going to be combined with the Electoral College. And the Electoral College is created by the U.S. Constitution. It's going to go through a revision when you have the 12th Amendment. It's going to go through a revision, and it goes through a revision after it goes through a revision in 1803 after the election of Thomas Jefferson as president, okay, in 1800. Because Thomas Jefferson wins the presidency, what puts him over are the Electoral College votes from the state of Virginia. And Virginia was the largest state as population-wise at the time, but they got those Electoral College votes largely because of their slave population. So because of the Three-Fifths Compromise, 1787, and because of the Electoral College, which is created by the U.S. Constitution in 1780, this not only gives imbalanced or a greater advantage when it comes to political power for the South, but it also gives them an incentive to keep slavery intact, because 1787, Pennsylvania was on the verge of eliminating slavery. And you're going to have other northern states that are going to phase slavery out. But you're going to have southern states that not only have an economic incentive to keep it in place, but also have a political incentive because they have a dominance in the U.S. House of Representatives, and they're going to be able to push through whatever legislation they want through the U.S. House of Representatives because they have more seats in the House of Representatives, because the enslaved African population, 3/5 of that population is counted, even though the slaves can't vote. Okay, so it's important to understand this. Okay, so in 1790, for example, Virginia had a total population of more than 690,000, but 288,000 of that population were enslaved African people. So the state's free population was about 404,000. Now, what's going to happen is, and then when you look at Pennsylvania at this time has a population of 434,000, but only about 4,000 of that population were slaves. Okay. So Pennsylvania was in the process of ending slavery, and by 1790, a majority of the state's black population of Pennsylvania was free, and those blacks could vote on the same basis as free whites. Their full population was counted. So if representation in Congress were based only on the free population, then Pennsylvania would be able to outvote Virginia. Okay, so they're fighting over power here, not just economics, but they're fighting over political power. If slaves were counted in allocating representation, then Virginia would be the most powerful state in the nation with the largest congressional delegation. So Southerners at the Philadelphia Convention, the spring of 1787, at the Philadelphia Convention, okay, and I'm missing some of your comments here. I'll go back. We'll get to some of your comments here on Facebook. I'm trying to go through my notes and get through this information, okay? And what I'll do here, how's everybody doing? Welcome to the broadcast today. Here, I'm Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. Share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. We're dealing with the 3/5 Compromise of 1787, sometimes called the 3/5 Clause, says that we were 3/5 of a human being. That's not what it says. So we're going through dispelling this myth. And then also we're talking about the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. I'll be teaching a session of that about 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today. We just posted the link there. Register here. You can register for that course because we deal with some of this information in that course, and we deal with thousands of years of history. So it's a 12-hour, 6-week online course that I teach. All the sessions are recorded. If you miss anything, you can go back and watch it over and over again. So share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Also invite your friends to tune in as well. Okay, so Southerners at the Philadelphia Convention in the spring of 1787, where they're debating the U.S. Constitution. Okay, the Southerners insisted that slaves be counted when allocating representation in Congress, even though everyone understood that the enslaved population were considered property and had no political rights. So throughout the convention, the slave owners also made it clear that they did not expect an end to slavery in their states. Okay, because they wanted to maintain power. Now, in the state of South Carolina, now remember, South Carolina is the first state to secede from the Union, okay, which leads to the Civil War. So South Carolina succeeds from the Union December 20th, 1860. And by February 1st of 1861, you're going to have 6 other states that join South Carolina in succeeding from the Union. They're going to form the Confederate States of America, which we know as the Confederacy. And the Civil War is going to start April 12, 1861, with the attack on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. Okay, this is how the Civil War starts. And the fight was over maintaining slavery. So a lot of the southern states cried states' rights, but it was states' rights that keep slavery intact. Okay, it was states' rights to keep slavery intact. So Charles Pinckney of South Carolina cited ancient Rome and Greece, and he declared that slavery was, quote, justified by the example of all the world, end quote. Okay, his cousin, General Charles Cotesworth Pinckney, told the convention, he's one of the delegates at the convention, one of the Southerners arguing for counting the enslaved population. General Charles Cotesworth Pinckney told the Philadelphia Convention, he said, quote, South Carolina and Georgia cannot do without slaves, end quote. South Carolina and Georgia cannot do without slaves. So the Southerners were adamant that slaves were property, and Southerners will continue to import more enslaved Africans from Africa. And at the same time, those enslaved Africans should be added to the number of free people when representation in Congress was being allocated, because they're jockeying for political power and maintaining political power. This is what this was about. So they wanted to keep economic power by keeping Africans enslaved. And the other thing we have to understand is that there were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. There were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. So a lot of times when they tell the story, they try to say that African people, all they did were pick the cotton and cook the master's food, things like this. No. We were the anchor makers. We were the shipbuilders. We were the barrel makers, the bartenders, the beer makers, blacksmiths, coppersmiths. We were boatmen. We were barbers, brewers when it comes to brewing beer, brick makers, bricklayers, brush makers. We were butchers, cabinet makers, carpenters, carpet cleaners, caterers, caulkers, chain makers, chimney sweepers. We were clerks. We were clergymen, cigar makers, clothiers, coach painters, cobblers, confectioners when it comes to making candy and chocolates and things like this. We were coppersmiths, cotton menders, okay, hemp baggers, daguerreotypers. Daguerreotype was the first photographic camera. Invented by John Daguerreotype about 1826, and it's available for commercial usage in the 1830s. Okay, we were decorative furnishers, distillers, domestics. Okay, flower inspectors, fishermen, engravers, engineers, engine builders, embroiders, dressmakers, furniture makers, gardeners, general mechanics. Okay, gold pencil finishers, hair makers, harness makers, hairdressers, gunsmiths, herb doctors, horseshoers, those who put the nailed the shoes onto the horse and make the horseshoes. We were horse trainers, okay, house painters, hunters, ink makers, instrument makers, inventors, iron molders, ironsmiths, jewelers, okay, laborers, lamp lighters. There were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country. So it's not just benefiting from African people picking cotton and cooking the master's food and things like this. It's exploiting the labor. It's exploiting the skills, trades, and crafts that we had in this country from 1619 to 1865. And being able to produce products and market these services, okay, being able to loan out enslaved Africans to work in the coal mines, having them work in the sawmills, different things like this. This is going to lead, and these were very dangerous jobs, by the way. This is going to lead to over 40 insurance companies in this country to take out insurance policies on enslaved Africans on the plantation. Because oftentimes when you had a slave that had a very dangerous job, the slave owner would take out an insurance policy on them. And then if they died untimely, they would recoup 3/4 of the money they had invested in that slave so they could go buy another one. And you had over 40 insurance companies in this country to sell policies on enslaved African people. One of the first ones was the Nautilus Mutual Life Insurance Company, which started in 1845 in Manhattan, New York. In the first 3 years, they sell about 508 policies on enslaved African people. And they're going to change their name to the New York Life Insurance Company. They're going to change their name to the New York Life Insurance Company. Now, to their credit, the New York Life Insurance Company has been open and honest about their ties to slavery. Okay, the majority of that money was not made from those policies. And there's an extensive article from the New York Times that talks about this. But to their credit, the New York Times has been open and honest about this. They provided all different types of documentation on policies of enslaved African people, things like this. Okay, but you have to understand this history. Okay, you have to understand this history. All right. So these are some of the type of things we deal with in the online course that I teach: Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. You've seen me in some documentaries like the Black Friday documentary, Resurrecting Black Wall Street, The Blueprint from Dr. Boyce Watkins and Your Black World Films. I will be in Atlanta this weekend because I got to fly early tomorrow morning to Atlanta for the Liberated Minds Black Homeschool and Education Expo. The Liberated Minds Black Homeschool and Education Expo. Those in the Atlanta area. Okay, so let me pause it right here. Okay, so want to thank everybody who's tuned in so far. Hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. So this broadcast here, we're clearing up some myths. And shout out to everybody watching us on Facebook, Candace and Willie, and a lot of people watching us on Facebook, Vanetta, Vi Minds in Detroit, Kevin. How's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. Shirley in Philadelphia. Okay, so we're clearing up myths about the 3/5 Compromise of 1787. All right. You can post some comments you have here. We'll get to those. And then also we just posted the link for the online course that I teach where we dispel more myths. We do a lot of history: Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, so I just pinned that to the thread here on Facebook. And so you can register for that. We're broadcasting on our YouTube channel also. So shout out to people watching us on YouTube also. How's everybody doing? And you can also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have the information for the online course there also. Okay. Now, somebody posted the question and asked about the TV show, the proposed TV show Confederate. That and I sent out some information about this in my email newsletter also. But there's a show being proposed about what happened if the South won the Civil War and slavery was still intact. Okay, slavery was still in existence, and these are white people who put this together. I'm trying to find the article here. They said that slavery is a topic that needs to be discussed, etc. Yeah, it's a topic that needs to be discussed, number one. But how many African Americans are going to be involved in discussing this topic? And from what perspective? You know, I don't think it's a good idea to try to discuss this type of history from the perspective of what if the South won the Civil War. No, you need to explain why the Civil War took place in the first place. Why did South Carolina succeed from the Union December 20th, 1860? Why were they followed by 6 other states by February 1st of 1861? You need to deal with the history leading up to the Civil War, not deal with some mythology of what would happen if the Civil War didn't take place and slavery was still intact, because they wouldn't make a movie. I don't think they would. They wouldn't have a TV show, definitely, about what if Germany won World War II and Adolf Hitler didn't die. I think he died during World War II, right around that time. What if he didn't die during World War II? Yeah, they wouldn't do that. So it's just ridiculous and disrespectful. So if you want to deal with real history, I have no problem with the documentary being made about the Civil War. Oh, there was already one. made about the Civil War. Ken Burns did one. I think it was Ken Burns who did that. So this is coming from Game of Thrones creators. NBCnews.com has an article about this. I don't watch Game of Thrones. A lot of these TV shows, I don't watch them. I don't have time to sit up there and deal with nonsense. I'm busy doing the research. And usually there are very few serial shows that I watch, weekly serial shows where you have to tune in, and very few shows like that I watch. Which one do I watch? I can't even think of one that I watch. Don't watch Empire. Don't watch Scandal. I can't think of one that I watch each week. I watched Rebel on BET to see what that was like. But I don't watch. I don't know one. Can't think of one offhand. So we'll post this article here. Okay, you can ask questions if you want to. Now, how'd you all like this type of information so far? We're going to go back to the broadcast here in just a minute, but I wanted to pop in for a minute, say hi to everybody. Can I still comment, Rose? No, you can still comment, Rose. Go ahead and comment. You can comment. Go ahead. All right. I'm going to post this article here from NBCnews.com. So this is about the proposed TV show. Okay, now this is from Game of Thrones creators. Name of the article: Game of Thrones creators to craft alt reality post Civil War America with Confederate. Okay. Now, personally, I think this is designed to appeal to a lot of Donald Trump supporters, especially in the South, because Donald Trump won all those southern states. They all went red for Donald Trump. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Okay. The creators of HBO's hit medieval fantasy Game of Thrones have their next show lined up for the premium cable network, but this one has no dragons or undead army of White Walkers. David Benioff and Dan Wise, who adapted Game of Thrones from George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire books, will write and direct an original series called Confederate, HBO said this past Wednesday. The show is set in an alternative reality in a nation where slavery is still legal and southern U.S. states have seceded from the Union. HBO said the series chronicles the events leading to the Third American Civil War. Really? So they took Underground off the air, right? And I did a broadcast about the TV show Underground and the problem with slave movies and slave TV shows, things like this. Now they want to come out with another slave TV show. Because this is basically what this is. Now they want to come out with another slave TV show. I don't think it's going to see the light of day. I think the NAACP, National Action Network, I think a lot of organizations are going to push back against this. Colorofchange.org will probably have a petition to push back against this. Now, they said alt reality TV show, right? The alt-right is dealing with an alternative reality. The alt-right, which is another term for white supremacy, the term alt-right coined by Richard Spencer, right? Founder of the National Policy Institute. Okay. To me, this sounds like something to appeal to a bunch of Donald Trump supporters. That those baskets of deplorables, that basket of deplorables. Okay. Because you have a lot of them who fly the Confederate battle flag and all this nonsense. And if you look at the broadcast that I did 10 minutes about slavery, you know, and I may have to, this evening, I may rebroadcast that 10 myths about slavery, right? Because the Confederate battle flag, what these people are flying, thinking is the Confederate flag, they don't understand history. That's not even the Confederate flag. That's the Confederate battle flag of Northern Virginia under General Robert E. Lee's command. That's not the Confederate flag. That's the Confederate battle flag of General Robert E. Lee. Okay, in Northern Virginia, there were 3 flags that flew over the Confederate States of America from 1861 to 1865. That flag was never one of them. That flag that they're walking around with, the flag that was on the General Lee, right? General Robert E. Lee, all this stuff. See, a lot of these Europeans don't even understand their own history. that they claim is their own history. A lot of them don't even understand this history. There were 3 flags that flew over the Confederate States of America from 1861 to 1865. That flag that they're flying, saying it's a Confederate flag, no, that never flew over the Confederacy. Okay. So Joshua Quinn said they're fighting to get it removed in Mississippi. Well, you just had an African-American judge. Roland Martin just interviewed him Friday, because I just finished watching the broadcast this morning. I DVR'd it. I DVR it every day. He interviewed an African-American judge in Mississippi who removed Mississippi State's flag from his courtroom, because the Mississippi State flag has the Confederate battle flag emblem in it. It's called the canton. They have it in the Mississippi State flag. Okay. He just removed it. He's getting death threats. He has police protection. He has personal security protection. He's getting death threats for removing the Mississippi State flag from the courtroom. But Mississippi was part of the Confederacy. Okay. So we have to understand these ties run deep, but they come out of ignorance. They come out of ignorance and white supremacy, and white supremacy and ignorance go hand in hand. Okay. Let's see here. Eric said, of course, the creator of the series Confederate have brought or using black writers, husband and wife writers and producers Nichelle Tramble Spellman and Malcolm Spellman, who are African-American, are defending the show and its premise. Okay. All right. They should talk about this on News One Now with Roland Martin. I'm gonna contact Roland and tell him to talk about it, man. Seriously. I know Roland. Roland called me last week, Tuesday. Was it last week? July 11th. Last week, whatever date. July 11th. He called me to talk for about a half hour. Because I used to guest host his national radio show. So people have been following me for some time. So, I used to guest host his national radio show, as well as Warren Ballentine. I used to guest host Warren Ballentine's national radio show, also on the Empowerment Radio Network. So Nichelle, so even if they have African Americans that are writers, so damn what? It's still a terrible idea. It's still a terrible idea. Okay. All right. So Television, aka television. Yeah, it's the Television. The judge is in Memphis now, staying in the same hotel where the Sons of Confederate Veterans are meeting this weekend. Okay. All right. So let's go back to this. So how you all like this type of information? We posted a link here. You can register for the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. It's a 12-hour, 6-week online course that I teach. We deal with thousands of years of history. We deal with the African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years. And we deal with, a ton of information. Okay, it's a 12-hour, 6-week online course. It's only $40. As soon as you register, you can watch last night's class. Okay, and also you can watch the previous 4 sessions also. All right, so check out this article from NBCnews.com. I know that AtlantaBlackStar.com has an article about it, and the other news outlets. This is just ridiculous. Okay, I want to go back to this article, then we'll go back to the Three-Fifths Compromise of 1787, right? So the show was set in an alternative reality in a nation where slavery is still legal and southern U.S. states have succeeded, okay? And you still have some Southerners that are bitter about the Civil War, bitter that the South lost, bitter that they had to give up their slaves. They want to go back to their old way of life. And this is what Donald Trump's campaign, part of his campaign was about, make America great again. He was appealing to a lot of these white people, especially a lot of poor whites, who felt dejected and felt left out of the recovery. And they wanted to go back to Mayberry, Andy Griffith, Aunt B, Opie. They want to go back to Leave It to Beaver, Beaver Cleaver, Ward and June. And one thing you notice about those shows is there's no black people on those shows. You know, especially with speaking roles. Andy Griffith, they had one African American had a speaking role, and he was a football coach for Opie. That was it. Okay, they wanted to go back to that time because they many of them they voted out of white supremacy and racism, right? And they suffered from what the Atlantic.com called cultural anxiety. Okay, and they had a big article about that. They said it was cultural anxiety that a lot of these people were voting for. Okay, voted for Trump because of cultural anxiety. And I have that article somewhere around here. I just saw it. So I just got back from Atlanta a few days ago, so my notes are all over the place. We'll post that link also. All right. So in this article here, it says it will explore perspectives including freedom fighters, slave hunters, politicians, journalists, and abolitionists on both sides of the divide, HBO said in a statement. Confederate is a world away from the dragons, dead armies, and magic in the medieval setting of Games of Thrones, where warring factions scheme and battle for control over the seven kingdoms of Westeros. The reveal drew condemnation. This reveal about this new show, Confederate, drew condemnation from wide swaths of the internet, with many mocking the premise and Daily Beast writer Ira Madison calling the show stupid as hell. I concur. Okay, so the co-creators Benioff and Wise said they had initially conceived Confederate as a feature film, but their success with Games of Thrones had convinced us that no one provides a bigger, better storytelling canvas than HBO. No further details were given on the new show casting or when it is scheduled to air. Okay, the announcement comes as Benioff and Wise head into the final season of Game of Thrones, scheduled to conclude next year. All right, so we posted that article. Read this type of nonsense. All right. Candace said many weren't happy with Roland Martin with the Dr. Umar Johnson interview. Well, unfortunately, many people don't know what the hell they're talking about. Many people did not see the entire show. They saw the 18-minute interview. They did not see the entire show. Some of them didn't even see the entire interview. They don't understand the format of the show. They didn't see the ads that News One was running the weekend before the show aired that said, how many degrees does he have? What's his relationship to Frederick Douglass? Dr. Umar Johnson will be here Monday to answer these questions and much more. I'll be doing a video addressing all this because most of these videos that are out are just totally inaccurate. And I actually talked to Roland about this interview the day after it happened as well. So most of these people really don't know what they're talking about. The interview was designed to deal with the backlash from Black Twitter, as well as the article from Michael Harriot from theroot.com after Umar's interview on the Breakfast Club, and to address these issues that arose, the backlash for him to explain his credentials, okay, explain his relationship to Frederick Douglass, all that, to deal with all this backlash. That's what it was about. The fact that it got heated, so damn what? A lot of discussions on that show get heated. I've seen some more heated than that. So most people putting out these videos and all this stuff, they're doing it to get the views and to generate revenue, have absolutely no clue what they're talking about. And they're not dealing with facts and evidence. They're not dealing with facts and evidence. See, I watched the entire show. Not only did I watch the entire show, I talked to Roland the day after the show. Roland called me. We talked for about a half hour about this nonsense. Okay, so most people putting this stuff out have no clue what they're talking about. So I'll be putting out a video to correct all this type of nonsense and deal with facts and evidence. I'm pulling together my sources because I'll be presenting about 15 different sources to document what I'm talking about. All right. Okay, so let's go back to this here. Because you all watch my videos, you know I don't half step. I don't deal with BS. Okay, I don't have time for that. All right, so we posted a link here. You can register for an online course also. And also people understand that wasn't Umar's first time on that show. That was at least his second time on that show. When he was on back in 2015, same format, 3 panelists, same position where those panelists were. Roland was in the same spot. Umar was in the same spot. See, most people don't watch that show on a regular basis, so they don't understand it. And that panel was not brought out for the Dr. Umar Johnson interview. That panel was on from the beginning of the show. Umar's interview was the third segment of the show, not the first segment of the show. The panel was on from the first segment, weighing in on topics in the first and second segment, like they always do. See, once again, the people putting out these videos, most of them don't lay this type of information out for you. They haven't researched it. They don't know the format of the show. They don't know who the panelists were. I actually know Lauren Victoria Burke. I've interviewed her a number of times. You can go Google her name or my name. You can listen to interviews I've done with her. People are trying to jump on this frenzy and generate YouTube views so they can generate the revenue from it and prop themselves up, and they're putting out misinformation, have no clue what the hell they're talking about. And that stuff is dangerous. That stuff is dangerous. And they're making themselves look like idiots. If you actually know the truth, they're making themselves look like idiots. Okay. So I'll be putting out a video refuting all that idiotic nonsense. And if anybody wants to challenge me on it, you know where you can find me. I don't run from nobody. Okay, so let's go back to this. Let's go back to this broadcast here, and we posted the link there. You can register for an online course also. Okay. Also check out the interview I did with Professor Kaba Kamene, formerly known as Booker T. Coleman, one of my teachers. Interviewed him Thursday on the African History Network show. We dealt with West African history, ancient to 1492. We have it here on Facebook, and also go to we put it on YouTube. Go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Click on our YouTube channel banner, and you can watch it there also. Okay, so let's go back to this here. All right. Just a second here. And the time, ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay. And what I'm going to do, I'll pin the link. I'll pin the information here. It says register here. Just click right there. As soon as you register, you can watch the first 3 classes. And we have about 12 hours of bonus footage also. Bonus content, I should say. Bonus content. The class is only $40. Okay. So 3/5 compromise, once again, okay, did not say that we were 3/5 of a human being. That's a total misunderstanding. That's Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution. Okay, so let's continue here. Now, for information about the skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country, and I talk about this in my course and some of my lectures, you can get the book, The Other Slaves by James E. Newton. The Other Slaves by James E. Newton. Newton, and Ronald Lewis. Ronald Lewis came out in 1978. The Other Slaves, Mechanics, Artisans, and Craftsmen. Okay, The Other Slaves, Mechanics, Artisans, and Craftsmen came out in 1978. Okay, all right. So let's continue here. Okay, so the Southerners were adamant that the slaves were property. They were fighting to get the full population counted. Okay. And Southerners stated that they were going to continue to import more African people from Africa as well. And at the same time, those slaves should be added to the number of free people when representation in Congress was being allocated. Okay. Now, James Wilson of Pennsylvania, one of the delegates there arguing on dealing with this. He's in a state that's phasing out slavery. James Wilson of Pennsylvania, who eventually supported the 3/5 compromise, understood the inconsistencies of the Southern demands. And he said, quote, did not well see on what principle the admission of blacks in the proportion of 3/5 could be explained. Did not well see on what principle the admission of blacks in the proportion of 3/5 could be explained. Okay, quote unquote. He asked if slaves were citizens, quote, why are they not admitted on an equality with white citizens? If slaves were citizens, because he's saying, wait a second, if you want to count them in the population, well, wait a second, you're not giving them the rights of white people. Okay, quote, why are they not admitted on an equality with white citizens? But if the slaves were, quote, admitted as property, end quote, it was reasonable to ask, then why is it not other property admitted in the computation? He's saying, wait a second, your chickens and your cows and your hogs, you're not trying to count them in the population. They can't vote. They don't have rights. Why are you trying to count enslaved Africans in the population? Because you don't want them to vote. Okay. So you have these debates taking place. Okay. You have these debates taking place. Now, the debate over representation was about political power, as I stated. Okay. And we have to understand that politics impacts every aspect of our life. Politics impacts every aspect of our life. Two main ways to understand politics. Number one, politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources. The legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources. And also politics is the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Politics is the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Okay. Two main ways to understand politics. All right. Politics is a lot more than just voting. Okay. Many of us don't understand really what politics is. Okay. And I'm going to show you the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, from Dr. David Imhotep, because that has a ton of information in it. And it deals with the African presence in this country here before it deals with the African presence in this country here before slavery started. Okay. All right. So let's continue here. And this is acting up a little bit. I don't know why. Okay, there we go. I'm trying to bring up trying to bring this up here to show you this, the PowerPoint presentation. Okay. So let's continue here. Okay, so you're going to have many Northerners who object to the idea of counting enslaved African people for representation in a nation that was designed to provide liberty for its citizens. Governor Morse, who was a New Yorker who represented Pennsylvania, the state of Pennsylvania, at the Constitutional Convention, noted that if slaves were counted for representation, the inhabitant of Georgia and South Carolina who goes to the coast of Africa and in defiance of the most sacred laws of Georgia and South Carolina, in defiance of the most sacred laws of humanity, tears away his fellow creatures from their dearest connections and damns them to the most cruel bondages, shall have more votes in a government instituted for protection of the rights of mankind than the citizen of Pennsylvania or New Jersey who views with a laudable horror so nefarious of practice. Let me repeat this. He said that the inhabitant of Georgia and South Carolina who goes to the coast of Africa and in defiance of the most sacred laws of humanity tears away his fellow creatures from their dearest connections and damns them to the most cruel bondages shall have more votes in a government instituted for protection of the rights of mankind than the citizen of Pennsylvania or New Jersey who views with a laudable horror so nefarious a practice. So he was one. This is Governor Morse of Pennsylvania. He was a white man who was against the slave trade. And he's saying, wait a second, if you count this slave population, you're going to give these people who participate in this heinous act more power in the House of Representatives than those of us who think it's immoral. Okay. So now by partially counting the 3/5 of the slave population, but partially counting the population of those enslaved for the allocation of representation, the South gained a huge bonus in the House of Representatives, even though these states considered their slaves to be property as such and had no political voice or legal rights. And this is what I was saying. The enslaved population could not vote, had no legal rights, but it's benefiting the South politically to have more slaves. This gives them an incentive to have more slaves. Okay. And what you're going to find is that when the importation of Africans is outlawed in 1808 because of a 20-year clause in the U.S. Constitution, what you're going to find is that the slave breeding business explodes in this country. The slave breeding business is going to explode in this country. All right, and then you're going to have a couple of things that take place. About 1793, the cotton gin is going to be created. Cotton gin created by Eli Whitney, and then you're going to have copies of the cotton gin that are created. Okay, copies of the cotton gin. What the cotton gin is going to do is it's going to make it easier to pick the seeds out of cotton. It's going to lower the cost of cotton overall to produce it. It's going to lower the cost of cotton products that are made. It's going to increase profitability and create a need for more enslaved African people. Then in 1803, you're going to have the Louisiana Purchase. So Thomas Jefferson is president at this point. He becomes president in the year 1800. You're going to have the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. Because of the Haitian Revolution from 1791 to 1803, and the Toussaint Louverture and Boukman Dada, Dessalines, etc., because of them defeating the French and Napoleon Bonaparte, all right, stand by. I'm not sure what happened here with the broadcast. It's freezing up here. So stand by. I'm trying to figure this out. I'm not sure why it's freezing up. I think there may be an issue with Comcast here in my area. It just froze up here. Okay. Hell. All right. Can you all hear me on Facebook? Okay, I don't think you all can hear me on Facebook either. All right, so we'll have to end this broadcast.